Before I start reviewing Lunar Flight, if you haven't seen our preview of the Oculus Rift, I've put a link in the description, and I'd recommend watching that first. Lunar Flight is essentially a modern take of Lunar Lander, a classic arcade game. Featuring realistic moon physics, Lunar Flight attempts to accurately simulate what it would be like to pilot a lunar module in low gravity. Although the base game of Lunar Flight is great, it really comes into its own when used with the Oculus Rift. It's surprisingly tricky to make a game truly immersive for the Oculus Rift. The best games and demos make you forget that you're in a virtual reality, but many feel that you're squinting through shuttered goggles at a low resolution screen. Because of the drawbacks of the Oculus Rift development kit, such as no positional head tracking and low resolution, it's not always possible to just drop Oculus Rift support into an unoptimized game and hope it works. For example, text is often unreadable, head control can feel clunky, and sometimes the game just isn't suited for virtual reality in the first place. Fortunately, developers Shovesoft have carefully ensured that Lunar Flight works with the Rift's drawbacks and nuances, creating possibly the most immersive virtual reality game that I've played yet. Sitting in the cockpit in Lunar Flight is an amazing experience. Everything is geared towards making you feel like you're actually there, from the multiple of things to interact with, right down to the astronaut model holding an Xbox controller. The cockpit for the Oculus Rift has been totally redesigned from the standard version, and it works beautifully. The large chunky text is always easy to read, and the controls are laid out in a 180-degree arc in front of you, rather than just neatly positioned directly in front. It's a lot of fun looking all over the cockpit, frantically pressing buttons and changing display views, a refreshing change from only tapping the buttons on the gamepad. Although the gamepad controls the actual lunar module, you'll need to make frequent use of the various buttons, displays and gadgets actually inside the craft. The displays allow you to view directly under the module, a bird's eye view and an overview map of the local area. Like using the mirrors when driving a car, you'll be crippled without them, and success relies on proper use of these displays. A nice feature is the recording function, in which you can save your runs in the module and view them later. It'd probably be useful for showing off the game to someone that hasn't tried the Rift, but without the need to teach them the fairly complex controls. The gameplay of Lunar Flight is both complex and insanely simple. Most missions pretty much just boil down to getting from point A to point B without crashing. Of course, this is easier said than done, and the game can be somewhat overwhelming initially. Unless you've played a lot of games set in zero gravity, then it can take some getting used to, and I found myself crashing a huge amount. It's also very addictive though, and each attempt at a mission makes you feel like you're genuinely improving as a pilot, helped by the total immersion. Pulling off that first perfect landing is an extremely gratifying experience, similarly to defeating your first boss in Dark Souls. For anyone prone to motion sickness, I'd recommend being very careful when playing this game. General play is so well implemented that motion sickness is almost a non-issue, but for a beginner it can be possible to get stuck spinning at high speeds in zero gravity. Naturally, this can have a nauseating effect, similarly to the various roller coaster simulators for the Rift. It can be a very scary and panicky experience when something goes wrong with the craft and you begin spiralling out of control. Steam begins escaping from the craft, while lights and alarms taunt you for your mistake. It's so well done that I would often flinch and turn away when my craft finally crash-landed on the surface. While the graphics for Lunar Flight aren't anything spectacular when viewed on a traditional screen, they work fantastically well within the Rift. The low resolution means that chunkier graphics tend to work well, and the simplicity of the visual style of Lunar Flight really helps to sell the idea that you are, in fact, on the surface of Mars or the Moon. When it feels so realistic at this lower resolution, I can't wait to see some of the games set in space when the consumer version of the Rift is finally released. As a product that hasn't even been fully released yet, it's understandable that the Rift doesn't currently have many fully featured games, beyond tech demos and retroactive support in older titles. Because of this, it's refreshing to find a game that's complete, totally designed to work with the Rift. Lunar Flight doesn't just offer the virtual reality wow factor, but is also an incredibly fun and rewarding game in its own right. As it stands, Lunar Flight offers the best total experience over any other game designed specifically for virtual reality. For anyone with an Oculus Rift, this is a game that you simply cannot overlook.